Story 1. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. is an incredible experience. It is heart-wrenching to walk through the museum and see what happened to the victims of Nazi rule. Story 2. The Killing Fields in Cambodia. I walked out alone, listening to the commentary and victim experiences. How do we so easily let this happen repeatedly, turning a blind eye because it doesn't directly affect us? It is a hideous way to live. Will we ever learn? Story 3. Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, Cambodia. I decided I didn't want to go to the killing fields. That was enough. Kids brutally murdering kids. Story 4. The September 11th Memorial Museum was heart-wrenching. They did a great job showing how the victims were everyday people who went to work on a Tuesday in September and never came home. Story 5. The memorial at Oklahoma City was striking. I felt calm while observing the memorial featuring the chairs, reading the names, and admiring the tree that survived the blast. However, I became emotional when I began reading the letters pinned to the fence from children to their parents and vice versa. Story 6. Seeing a total eclipse evoked a deep emotional response. No level of partial eclipse compares. Story 7. Many people are sharing their sad experiences, but I want to express that my visit to Glacier National Park last summer brought me to tears. The sheer majesty of the park and its natural beauty was breathtaking. I took hundreds of photos, but none of them do the park justice. Story 8. Holocaust exhibit at the Imperial War Museum in London included photos of victims and children's toys. Story 9. The National Civil Rights Museum and the Lorraine Motel Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, left me feeling saddened and appalled by the hardships that African Americans have faced throughout their history. They and their allies have endured so much. Story 10. As a Japanese person, Hiroshima's museum left me speechless for most of the visit. By the end, I just cried softly with my mom. Story 11. An exhibit inside one of the buildings at Auschwitz features video recordings of Jewish communities' daily life before World War II, following a morning spent visiting the camp and witnessing the atrocities that occurred there. Story 12. The lunch counter sit-in simulation at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta was challenging for me. I am an audio-based person, and wearing headphones with hate speech affected me significantly. Story 13. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. was impressive when it opened. I observed a multi-generational African-American family enjoying the monument. A grandmother in a wheelchair, an older man pushing her along, a younger mother, and her little girl were present. As an average white guy, witnessing a family of color who collectively must have experienced the full spectrum of American racial discrimination and violence was very powerful. I am unsure if it was intentional, but the large bust of Martin Luther King Jr.'s head appears to be purposefully ignoring the Jefferson Memorial across the water. Story 14. The Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland made me feel like I was truly in the Star Wars universe. Story 15. The Van Gogh immersive experience was incredible. It was astonishing to see the images that he created. It makes you wonder what was in his mind. Overall, it was a very stimulating experience. It was remarkable, even for someone who is not an art enthusiast. It is one of the most impressive things I have ever witnessed. Story 16. At the MoMA PS1 Museum, there was an exhibit resembling a wake or funeral viewing, featuring a long altar in the middle. On the altar were numerous photos of transgender individuals who had died violently. The experience was incredibly sobering, particularly because the photos showcased very young people appearing happy and lively. Many of the images resembled social media posts, which emphasized the tragedy, as it was evident that many had died in recent years. Overseeing the display was a mural of Marsha P. Johnson. While photos can be found online, they may not fully capture the profound impact of seeing so many images in one space. Story 17. The Titanic Museum in Belfast offers an incredible experience that explores both the sinking and the creation of the famous ship. The first half of the museum highlights the significance and scale of the cruise ship's construction for Belfast's economy. A large window provides a view of the dry dock construction area where the Titanic and its sister ship were built. This is likely the closest any of us will ever be to the Titanic again. Story 18. Hiroshima Museum in Japan was made even more eerie by the presence of school groups being guided through it. That experience was challenging. Story 19. Not me, but my friend. This isn't as poignant as the top posts, but she saved up money to go to Tokyo Disneyland specifically for the Beauty and the Beast ride. We weren't expecting it to be a 9-minute walkthrough of the movie. She felt as if she was in the film itself, and I was impressed by how good the animatronics and light show were. She was seated with another foreign couple, whom we can call Disney fans. They said they worked for Walt Disney World and mentioned that the ride in Tokyo Disneyland raised the bar significantly. By the end of the ride, my friend and the woman were in tears. My friend is planning to save up and wait another year before experiencing Frozen at either Hong Kong Disneyland or Tokyo Disneyland. Story 20. Team Lab in Tokyo was an incredible experience that felt almost surreal despite being completely sober. I found myself overwhelmed with joy and emotion, shedding happy tears. In contrast, the memories of Ground Zero evoke sad tears. Story 21. The September 11th Memorial Museum has a heavy atmosphere, and it is incredibly quiet in most areas, aside from occasional bagpipe players and a few videos. They have a room with pictures of almost every person who died, and one of those was a vacation photo of a man standing in Rome. I recognized the area because I had been there before, and it struck me that I had a connection to this man. It is hard to explain, but it felt very profound at the time. It made the event feel more personal rather than just something that happened when I was younger. Story 22. Most recently, I wasn't really crying, but I felt incredibly close to that emotion while seeing the Grand Canyon. During a road trip, we traveled the entire Grand Staircase down to the Grand Canyon. Staring at it and reflecting on how long it has been there and how long it will continue to be moved me deeply. Story 23. The child room in the Kigali Genocide Memorial Museum in Rwanda moved me deeply. I cried several times that day while reflecting on it, and I rarely cry. Story 24. A positive cry. The frescoes in the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua. I didn't know that I would be so affected by the art of a man I knew nothing about, Giotto. It made me realize that I am probably not as much of a cultural barbarian as I think I am. Beautiful. Story 25. Not quite the same as a museum or historical location, but the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan impacted me deeply. I had always heard about storming the beach at Normandy, but I didn't fully understand its significance until I saw that opening sequence. Story 26. Walking through old historical sites where you can almost feel the past around you is always surreal. Places like Pompeii or ancient castles have that kind of energy. Story 27. There were two significant locations, the Collinwood School Fire Memorial and the Hazarat Angel, at Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland. Both were very overwhelming to finally stand in front of. Story 28. A hostel I stayed at in Barcelona offered a walking tour that I participated in. At a certain stop in a plaza, the guide pointed out some indentations and cratering on a stone wall that used to be a hospital or orphanage and said, somewhat nonchalantly, that those were shrapnel holes from a fascist Italian bomb dropped by the Italian Air Force during the Spanish Civil War, which killed several children. I took some time at the back of the group after that. Years later, I was in graduate school studying public history at a university a short drive from Washington, D.C. One of the classes was essentially about creating effective exhibits, so we had several field trips to well-regarded museums in the city.